All right, welcome everyone. Let's jump into our deep dive on mental health advocacy. We're looking at the Breaking the Silence script today. And, my guess is you're here because you get it, mental health matters, but you're ready to go beyond that. You want to know, how to actually make a difference.
Absolutely.
And it is a big deal. I mean, think about this. Almost 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. are dealing with a mental health condition right now.
Yeah. It's a staggering statistic. And the thing is, it has this huge economic impact, too. We're talking billions of dollars lost every year.
It's wild. And you know what really struck me about this script? How it turns that idea that seeking help is a sign of weakness completely on its head.
Right. It's actually the opposite. Seeking help is a sign of strength, of self-awareness.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But hold on, before we get all action-oriented, let's just define mental health for a second. I mean, it's more than just, not having a mental illness, right?
Exactly. Think of it this way. We all know we need to take care of our physical health, right? Good food, exercise, all that. Well, we need to nurture our mental well-being, too. It's how we handle stress, how we build relationships, how we find purpose in life. It impacts everything we do.
So it's like mental fitness. Got to keep our minds in shape just like our bodies.
Yeah, I like that. Mental fitness.
But then there's this huge obstacle we have to deal with, right? The stigma surrounding mental health. It's like this invisible wall that stops people from getting the help they need.
And that's where things get really interesting. The script compares mental health to, say, a physical illness like diabetes. You wouldn't blame someone for having diabetes, right?
Right.
You'd offer support, understanding. But for some reason, we treat conditions like depression or anxiety totally differently.
That's such a good point. It's like, why the judgment? So this script, it's not just about defining the problem, though. It lays out some strategies for building a more supportive society. And it all starts with education, right?
Absolutely. The more we understand about mental health, what causes it, the symptoms, the treatments available, the better we are at recognizing the signs in ourselves and others. And then we can offer support, dispel those harmful myths. Just be more informed and empathetic overall.
Knowledge is power, right?
Definitely.
But it doesn't stop there. The script also talks about open conversations, bringing mental health out of the shadows. But that can be tough, honestly. How do we actually start those conversations in a way that feels safe, productive?
That's a really good question. I think it's about creating a space where vulnerability is valued, where people feel heard without judgment.
Hmm.
Think about it this way. If you were struggling, how would you want to be treated? What kind of language, what approach would feel most supportive to you?
That's such a good point. It's about approaching these conversations with empathy, genuine curiosity, not like we're trying to fix someone or offer unsolicited advice.
Right. Sometimes just listening without judgment is the most powerful form of support you can give.
That's so true.
And that leads us to the next piece, access to resources. It's great to talk about mental health, but people need tangible support too.
Right, and that's where things get a little tricky. We need better access to mental health services, which often means pushing for some big systemic changes. Things like affordable therapy options, shorter wait times for appointments, better insurance coverage. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. Those systemic changes are essential. But we also can't underestimate the power of individual actions in our own communities. Supporting local mental health organizations, even just by volunteering or spreading the word about their services, or advocating for mental health initiatives right in your workplace, your school. These things make a difference.
So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach, right? We need systemic change, but individual actions, even small ones, can create a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Okay, but it's not just knowledge, open conversations, and access to resources. The script also emphasizes something else, and I think it's really important. Compassion.
Compassion is at the heart of it all. It's about recognizing that everyone's fighting their own battles. And sometimes a simple act of kindness can be a lifeline for someone who's struggling.
Just a simple, "Are you okay?" can open a door to a conversation that could change someone's life.
Absolutely.
It's about waving that compassion into our everyday interactions. So we've laid some groundwork here, defining mental health, acknowledging the stigma, exploring some strategies. Where do we go from here?
Well, in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to build deeper into the individual's role in all of this. Advocacy. What can you do to put these ideas into action? Stay tuned for part 2, where we unpack those practical steps and empower you to become a force for change in your own life and community.
Okay, welcome back to our deep dive on mental health advocacy. In part 1, we talked big picture, right? The scale of the problem, that stigma, and, some strategies for change. But now let's get practical. What can we, you and me, actually do to make a difference? This Breaking the Silence script, it really emphasizes this call to action.
Yeah, it does. It's not just about raising awareness, it's about taking action, those concrete steps. And I think one of the most powerful things we have is personal storytelling.
That's something the script does really well, actually. It weaves those personal stories throughout. Remember that part where an audience member shares their experience with anxiety?
Oh, yeah, that was powerful.
It's like suddenly mental health isn't this abstract thing. It has a face, a voice.
Exactly. When we hear real people sharing their struggles and their triumphs, it humanizes the issue. And I think that's what helps to break down those walls of stigma. It reminds us that these challenges can affect anyone, regardless of background.
And those stories of recovery are so important too, right?
Absolutely.
They give hope to people who might be struggling, feeling lost.
Yeah, hope is huge.
But even if we're not ready to share our own stories publicly, even just listening to others with empathy, that can be a powerful form of advocacy too.
Oh, absolutely. Active listening without judging or giving advice, it creates a safe space for people to feel heard, validated, and that can be incredibly healing.
The script also talks about, speaking up when we encounter stigma, whether it's like a casual joke, one that just perpetuates stereotypes, or maybe even a discriminatory policy at work. But honestly, that could be pretty intimidating. What advice would you give to someone who wants to speak up but just isn't sure how to do it effectively?
That's a good question. And it's tough for sure. I think the first thing is to remember your intention. You're coming from a place of concern, right? And a willingness to educate.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be confrontational. Sometimes just saying something like, hey, I'm not sure that language is appropriate. Mental health is a serious issue. That can plant a seed, make someone think twice.
So it's about that balance, being assertive but respectful.
Exactly.
And if we're feeling lost, unsure how to handle a situation, there are resources out there to help us, right?
Oh, for sure. Lots of mental health organizations offer tips on how to have those tough conversations. You don't have to figure it out on your own.
That's good to know. But speaking of resources, how do we actually advocate for better access to mental health services? That can feel really overwhelming. I mean, we're talking about policy changes, funding, tackling systemic barriers. Where do we even start?
It's true. Systemic change, it takes a lot of effort, a collective effort, really. But there are things we can do right here in our own communities, supporting those local mental health organizations, volunteering our time, donating. Those things can make a tangible impact.
And advocating within our workplaces, schools, too, like pushing for mental health initiatives, employee assistance programs, mental health training for staff, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And let's not forget the power of voting. Researching candidates, seeing where they stand on mental health issues, supporting those who prioritize funding for these services, it all adds up.
So many different levels to it. So it's about taking that passion and turning it into action. Speaking up, supporting people in need, pushing for those policy changes. But in all of this, it's easy to forget about ourselves, right?
Oh, that's so important. Self-care, especially when you're doing this kind of work, it's essential. Like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup.
What are some self-care practices that you found helpful? I mean, not just the like bubble bath stuff. What really works to stay grounded, to avoid burnout?
For me, it's about boundaries. Setting boundaries, making sure I get enough sleep, finding time for things that I enjoy, even if it's just 15 minutes reading a book or going for a walk.
Yeah, those little moments can make a big difference.
They really can. You have to take care of yourself.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to that call to action. We've talked about the tools we have, personal storytelling, speaking up, advocating for resources, self-care. What's the key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with today?
I think the biggest thing is this. Mental health advocacy, it's not a spectator sport. It's about showing up, using your voice, taking action, and remember, even those small actions can create a ripple effect. You really do have the power to make a difference.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. So we've talked about a lot, right? The problem, storytelling, speaking up, all those steps for change. But I want to get into some of those questions and things people get hung up on with this whole topic. Like, I hear people say, I'm not a therapist, so what can I really do? It could feel overwhelming if you don't have that, like, expert knowledge.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. It's a common thing. But honestly, you don't have to be a therapist to help. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there for someone. Listen without judging, offer support, let them know they're not alone. That can make a world of difference.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's about that support, the compassion, not trying to, like, be the therapist.
Exactly.
But there's this other myth, I think, that talking about mental health makes it worse. Like, if you're going to put ideas in someone's head. What do you think about that
Oh,
one?
that's a big one. But it's just not true. Talking openly about mental health actually does the opposite. It normalizes things, reduces shame. It helps people feel more comfortable seeking help. It's like bringing it out of the shadows, letting the light in.
I like that, bringing it into the light.
Yeah,
But I think another reason people hesitate sometimes is they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. It's a sensitive topic, right? So it's natural to be a little cautious. What advice would you give to someone who wants to be supportive but isn't sure how to approach it?
I get it, for sure. But I think the most important thing is your intention. Come from a place of genuine concern. Be willing to listen. You don't need all the answers or to say the perfect thing. Sometimes just validating their feelings, letting them know you're there, that's incredibly powerful.
And if you're not sure how to respond, like offering practical support, helping them find resources, going to an appointment with them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that can be huge.
But it's easy to forget about ourselves in all of this, too. We've talked a lot about advocating for others. But what about advocating for our own mental well-being? Self-care. Especially when we're doing this work, it can be a lot.
Absolutely. Self-care is essential. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? And it doesn't have to be complicated. It's about finding those little things that work for you that bring you joy, setting boundaries, sleep, nature.
Yeah, those things that recharge you.
Right.
It's knowing your limits, making sure you're taken care of so you can show up for others. And remember, seeking professional help, that's a sign of strength, not weakness.
Could not agree more. And as we wrap up our deep dive into breaking the silence, I keep thinking about that question it asks. That if you could create one program, one thing to support mental health in your community, what would it be?
That's a good one. What need do you see that isn't being met?
Yeah. Maybe it's a support group for young adults, a mental health campaign in schools, more funding for affordable therapy, something totally different.
There's so much potential.
Right. And the key is take that inspiration and turn it into action. Because every step we take, even the small ones, it all builds toward a more compassionate, supportive world.
So to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We've, really explored this mental health advocacy, the strategies, the action steps. And I hope we've, inspired you to be part of the change.
Because you're not alone in this. We can break the silence, challenge the stigma, and together we can create a world where mental well-being is valued, supported, and a priority for everyone.